Okay, so today's lesson is going to be about combining like terms. And just to remind you, combining means you're either adding or subtracting, but we call it combining because we're not going to think of those pluses and minuses as add or subtract anymore. We think of those pluses and minuses as the signs of the numbers. And remember, when you're combining, you might look at something and it looks like subtraction, but you actually add. You might look at something that looks like addition, but you actually subtract. So you've got to think of it as combining and use the sign rules. So the sign rules for combining are going to come back here. And again, we talked about like terms last time. That means they have the same variable or base and what? And exponent. So don't forget what a like term looks like. Okay? So we're going to go through some of these. Mostly this is going to be an exercise in signs. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you some examples in words first to show you how much sense this makes. You do this all the time, you just don't recognize that you're doing it. So let's say that you have 2 pencils on your desk, and you have 5 pencils in your pencil case. If I asked you how many pencils you had, you wouldn't say, well, I have 2 on my desk, and I have 5 in my pencil case. You would say you have what? 7 pencils. Not just 7, but 7 pencils, right? You name the objects to say how many of what it is you have. Okay? So that's exactly what combining like terms is going to be like. We're going to have terms that are the same, and instead of saying, right, there are 3 students here and 2 students there, and here are 3, and there's 5, and there's 1, and there's 1, right? You would just say how many students are together in the room, yeah? So collecting or combining like terms is the same thing. So what we're going to do is talk about the mathematical steps for doing that. And remember that most of this is going to be a review of signs for you. So you've got to be careful about signs. Okay, so let's talk about the steps. To collect/combine like terms. Step 1, we have to identify the like terms. So first thing we're going to ask is, are they like terms? Because you can't combine everything. So stop yourself, slow down, because what's going to happen is you're going to want to combine everything that has an X in it. And that can't happen, right? So slow yourself down. Are they like terms? Meaning they have the same base and the same what? Exponent. Good. Exponent index, yeah? Both of those things have to be the same. So in other words, y to the second can only be a like term to other what? Y to the seconds. X's are only like terms to other plain old X's. Right? Okay? Good. So here's what we're going to do. Our steps. We're going to combine the coefficients. Because remember, the coefficient, which includes the sign, by the way, right? The coefficient tells you how many something you have, of something you have, and that's what you're going to do, is when you're combining, you change how many of something you have. We go back to that example a while ago. If I took those 2 pencils and added some more pencils, does that mean I now have pens? Nope. So the objects that you're dealing with stay the same. What's going to change is how many of them you have, and how many is the sign and the coefficient. So you'll combine the coefficients using the sign rules. So right now might be a good time to review those. Remember the sign rules? If the signs are the same, keep the sign. Good. Oh, not subtract, but what? Add the numbers. Good. Okay. The second one says if the signs are different, keep the sign of the larger. Excellent. And what do we do to the numbers? Subtract the numbers. Okay? So those 2 rules for combining. All right? So Looked at those when we were looking at the number section. Now we're going to be using them quite a lot. In algebra, those pluses and minuses are always signs. They're never anything other than signs. Okay? All right. And finally, because the objects don't change just because you have more of them, you're going to keep the base and exponent. So it's important to understand what operation you're looking at or what you're doing in order to know when to do something and when not to do something. Because it's just as important to know when not to. Okay? So to collect our like terms, collect/combine means the same thing. First, we make sure that they are indeed like terms, meaning they have the same what? Base and exponent. Excellent. Then to combine them, we simply combine the coefficients using the sign rules. If the signs are the same, I what? Keep the sign and add. If the signs are different, I keep the sign of the larger and subtract. Okay? And then finally, we just keep the base and exponent. So if they started off as x to the seconds, they're going to end up as x to the seconds. Okay? That part won't change. Good. So let's just go to your book and look at some of these. Okay, so the first thing is they remember that things are like terms. So like here, we have positive 2xy's and negative 5xy's. You can have more than one variable and they can still be like terms. They just have to be identical. So this is an xy term and this is an xy term. Get used to that. In a moment, I'm going to be calling on you and I'm going to say what kind of term it is. And you're going to say, that is an xy term. Why is it an xy term? Because the base names the term, right? So, what kind of term is this then? A squared or a to the second, however you want to say it, okay? What kind of term is this one? An a term. Are a squareds and a's like terms? They both have a's in them. Doesn't matter if the exponent is different, they're not, what are they called? Like terms. Good. So, if you look at their example, here we have 2a's plus 4a's. Well, 2a's plus 4a's means we have 6a's. And because they're both positive, it's positive 6. And I'm going to make you say the positives, yes. Because what is the number one mistake y'all are going to make? Sign errors. What's the number one way to make sure you don't do that? Think about it. Okay? And if you stop and say positives as well as negatives, then that way signs are always going to be on your mind. Yeah? Okay. So, just look at a few examples here. Pull them up without the answers so you don't just read the answers. So we're just going to look at a couple of these. And this is tiny. Let's see if I can make it any bigger. Hold on. Okay, so I'll just rewrite them. So let's say we have 3x plus 2x's. Now I'm going to ask you each piece of this. So first of all, I need to see if they are like terms. The only way you'll know that is to identify the terms. So what kind of term is this first one? An x term. What kind of term is the second one? Also an x term. So are they like terms? Yes, therefore they can be combined. How many x's do I have in the first one? Positive 3 of them. How many in the second one? Positive 2 of them. Positive 3 plus 2 is going to make positive 5. And what kind of things are they? X's. So positive 5x. Now, do you need to write the plus in front? Well, it's up to you. If you don't make sign errors, then you don't need to. But if you are still working on your signs, then you need to. Okay? Now, it's never wrong if you put the plus, but it can be wrong, but it will be wrong if you don't put a minus, right? So you might as well just get used to writing them all until the time you get better at something, right? Okay. Let's look at another one. Say we have 2x minus x squared. What kind of term is the first one? X term. What kind of term is the second one? X squared or x to the second. So are they like terms? No. Well, if they're not like terms, can I combine them? No. So that's my answer. It's just like saying I have 2 pens and 2 pencils. I can't combine them because they're not like objects. All right, so watch the signs. So let's look at another one. Say we have negative 2x plus 3 minus x. Do I have any like terms up there? Yes. Which ones are the like terms? I have two x terms. So I have negative 2x's here and what here? Well, negative x, right? But it doesn't have a number in front of it. So, exactly. Anytime you don't have a number, you assume it to be a 1. And if you want to put those ones in there to help yourself out, go for it. Whatever you can do to make sure that you get the right answer is what you need to do. So I'm going to combine negative 2x's and negative 1 answers. Answers. So are they, what's the sign of the negative, what's the sign of the 2? What's the sign of the 1? So are the signs the same or different? So what am I going to do? Keep the sign and do what to the numbers? Add them. They stay x's. And what about the positive 3? You're just going to write plus 3. Exactly, because that's a constant term. It's not an x term, so they can't be combined. And that's all there is to it. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the book and look at some of the other questions that they give you, just so that we know we don't have any surprises. So here you're going to simplify. If you'll remember when we looked at order of operations, simplify means do the math. Right? Use the order of operations to do whatever you can do. Okay? So if it says simplify, that just means do the math that you can do. Okay? Like terms, like terms, like terms, like terms. Here's where we get into something interesting. All right. You may remember this. If not, don't worry about it. We'll talk about it now. Say we have y minus a negative 4y. We've had this situation before where we've had this minus a minus. Remember that we conveniently call those minuses negatives, but they don't really mean negative. What is the literal name for that minus? The opposite of. Okay? So this literally means to take the opposite of 4. Right? So what is the opposite of an opposite? The opposite of a negative is going to become a positive. Do you remember those? So if you have those negatives stacked together like that, do not ever say 2 negatives make a positive. That's not what's happening. What's happening is here, this is saying we need to take the opposite of the negative. And the opposite of a negative is a positive. Okay? Don't think of it as 2 negatives make a positive. That'll cause you more trouble later than you ever can imagine. Okay? All right. So be careful if you see these negatives stacked like that. Okay. Let's see if they do anything else unusual to you. Nope. Just lots and lots and lots of combining like terms, which is great because you're going to need them. So here's your exercise. And no, you will not be able to see it all on my screen, so you will need your own device. So what you're going to do is you're going to do exercise 4C, all of them. Now, this is a lot of them, but that should tell you why. Why would they have so many of the same skill? You've got to remember, it's that important. You've got to really practice and know what it is you're doing. Okay? So page 80, exercise 4C.